Before the video starts, I just want to say I have an Instagram that you can follow. I do post my cat on there, some memes, and some other stuff too, so if you're interested in that kind of shit, go follow me. Alright, thanks.
Welcome to the world of Tales from the Trip.
I received a small sample of a relatively novel substance to try, 3-MeO PCE, and plugged rectal administration in a gelatin capsule. I'm a tall, 200-pound male with a very steady and calm temperament. I have a great job in science and technology, a loving family, an amazing group of friends and girlfriend, and overall, extremely good health and fitness. I have experience with every common recreational substance and most of the uncommon ones. My full list of recreational chemicals that I put in my brain is over 80. I am extremely careful in my substance use and am a resource to my community on risk reduction practices and usage guidelines. I volunteer as a psychedelic counselor at festivals and events to help people through difficult experiences, and I needed to draw upon my full mental toolkit in this scenario, which has never happened before to me personally. Despite my extensive use, I don't use often, so I have no tolerance except to stimulants as a consequence of my prescribed medication. I have a sleep disorder and use armodafinil and Adderall to help, and take those almost every workday. My set is a weekend resistance party with talks early in the evening and DJs playing until late. The crowd was made almost entirely of my good friends and acquaintances. The venue was atypical, a shitty community center with a poor sound system. Setting is positive. My girlfriend was gone for the weekend, so I figured it would be a perfect time to try this new chemical. After the talks were done, I rectally self-administered one gelatin capsule containing 28 milligrams of 3-MeO PCE. The aim was to achieve moderate dissociation that makes social interactions more pleasing and dancing more enjoyable, more being inhabited by the music. 20 minutes in. Maybe some light hints of dissociation already. My visual perception feels slightly altered, depth and perspective and field of vision in particular, but just the barest amount. Turns out there is a weird performance happening on stage before the DJs get to do their thing. The weird performance is done, and as soon as the sound is turned off, I am launched into moderate dissociation and a profound sense of feeling unsettled. This is not what I was expecting. I tell this to my friends that I'm laying with on a bunch of squishy pillows and mattresses. They take my description in stride. I try a lot of weird drugs and in unusual combinations. 35 minutes in. Time is moving very
Slowly.
Conscious of how my attitude will shape this experience, I'm careful not to describe my state of mind to my friends using negative descriptions or imagery, but I can't help but feel that this was a mistake, and a mistake that is just getting started. I'm having a lot of trouble mentally. While I recognize that I am only potentially ambulatory under my own power, a chorus of mania has risen within my thoughts and within my chest. A buzzing energy so loud it is drowning out my ability to control my state of mind in any way. I continue to reassure myself that I am among friends, comfortable, safe, and will ride out this unexpectedly intense experience. I tell anyone who tries to interact with me that I am not particularly verbal and overwhelmed in my current state of probably too much chemical. I spend this time doing breathing exercises, focusing on people's voices, and attempting to describe my experience without ascribing any value judgment to it. My large muscle groups are spasming and vibrating. Everyone is extremely impressed at how my quadriceps are vibrating the whole group of reclining people and cushions. People touch my hands and feel how they're buzzing slightly. This is an extremely unusual experience for me and doesn't make me feel better. I make the mistake of closing my eyes. There is some dark internal imagery that I'm curious about, but more importantly, the world seems to violently spin away from me in a profoundly jarring way whenever I close my eyes for more than a second or two. I resolve to not let my curiosity get the better of me. An hour and a half in. It's not helping that the music is shitty and the sound system is terrible. I try to focus on criticizing all the aspects of the party that are subpar with my friends, and we laugh about how spoiled we are and how lucky we are. I try to inhabit the gratitude, but it's still extremely difficult to maintain positive and coherent thoughts over the manic energy that is racing through my brain and pounding in my chest. I am legitimately worried about temporary or lasting psychosis among all my jumbled thoughts. My heart rate feels faster than usual, but not excessively so. I'm still reclining on soft things. I'm encouraging a friend to tell me about her current life and daily struggles and triumphs. It's helpful to focus on her voice and her story. The mania feels like it may be starting to fade. I continue breathing exercises, restarting whenever I've forgotten to continue every so often. My large leg muscles, shoulder muscles, and lower arm and hands are still spasming lightly, off and on, but the intensity has diminished. I find that I am enjoying hitting myself with a closed fist in the leg. It feels very cathartic for whatever reason. I tell my friends that I know it's not socially appropriate for me to keep hitting myself as I'm doing it repeatedly, and they laugh. I notice that I'm hitting hard enough to give bruises later, certainly harder than I've hit anyone else ever, so I stop. An hour 45 in. My vision is becoming less dizzying. The music is still terrible, so I decide to try and stand up and move around under my own power, which is successful. Standing and walking is too full of stimuli to be pleasant, and I feel the mania rising and falling within my perception. But I walk to the bathroom and quickly use it. Interestingly, being alone in a one-person bathroom stall is more disconcerting than being in a room full of people, likely because most of those people were friends, or at least acquaintances. An hour and 50 minutes in. I am standing and participating, haltingly, in conversations. My friends seem very sympathetic. I notice that I am much more aware of the glances of strangers as I walk carefully around the party. They don't feel invasive. I'm just curious about why they're looking at me. Myself and the two friends I came with head to the dance floor to try and see if it sounds any better. The music isn't terrible. The sound quality is actually better on the dance floor, and not horrifically loud. We dance a little bit. I smile and laugh and enjoy my awkwardness. I feel like a stiff robot dancing, and my friends laugh with me. We decide the music is terrible enough to leave. That's fine with me. They call a vehicle and drop me off nearby at my house. The overwhelming tide of frenetic buzzing energy has calmed down, but I still feel a pit of absolute mania inside of my stomach, so I take 20 milligrams of baclofen to erase the mania and 2 milligrams of atizolam to calm my nerves and push me towards sleep. Water isn't pleasant, but I drink it. After a short 20 minutes of chatting online with my friends, the mania and psychotic chattering within my brain has largely calmed itself down, and I go to bed. I wake up in something of a haze from the baclofen. I've promised my friends I'll be at brunch at a bar nearby, so I haul myself into the shower and think very fuzzy thoughts. Showering does help a lot. I microwave some leftover chorizo quesadillas with only minor questions about the wisdom of a large and greasy breakfast before I devour it all. One Irish coffee, some sips of Bloody Mary, and a sour beer later, and I feel significantly more human than before. I go on a daytime hike in the hills with other friends. I feel mostly recovered from the baclofen fuzziness, and I am in a generally great mood from the dissociative afterglow. In summary, I read blue light forums about dosing this chemical, and my dose was just much too high. The people reporting on the forum about 30 milligram doses being rewarding likely had non-trivial dissociative tolerances. When I take it again, I will start off with a sensible 10 milligrams and dose accordingly from there. This chemical feels significantly more manic than 20 milligram doses of 3-MeO PCP. I felt like the psychosis could have temporarily overwhelmed me, although this likely isn't true or relevant. It was a very intense experience, and I recommend starting your dose in the single digits or teens at the most. In the early morning of a great party at home with some friends, a bag of 3-MeO PCP and 3-MMC got mixed up. I will not go into how this happened, as it does not matter. A friend weighed out 160 milligrams of what he thought was 3-MMC, but ended up to be 3-MeO PCE, and so the story begins. After about 10 minutes, I recall there being a discussion about the bags potentially being mixed up. I myself did some quick Googling for other people that had ingested these kind of amounts of 3-MeO PCE, but could not find much, the main reason of writing this. I cannot remember much else from before, except everything starting to feel extremely dissociative. From this point on, I have to rely mainly on what my friends told me afterwards. When it was clear that I really had consumed an overdose, they responded quickly and prepped me with atizolam and clonazepam. I was put to bed together with the other friend that had consumed the same dose. The following hours, we were watched over by our friends. They told me we both had extreme muscle spasms, rapid involuntary eye movement, and were in a sort of psychotic state. I can remember wanting to sit up, but was unable to do so. One of my friends repeatedly put me back down, which seemed to calm me for a few minutes. One of the first things I could remember was sitting on the sofa in the early evening. I could see and hear, but could not process any of it. With waves, I could think somewhat and started to feel really scared. I barely moved and felt overwhelmingly hopeless. With me being able to think a little, I started to feel like a vegetable that was trapped in my own body, unable to communicate with the outside world. As the time progressed, the idea of this being forever grew, and thus, I got more scared. Eventually I could smoke and drink water with some help, but I could still not really talk or process any of my senses. A little bit later, I remember turning my head and looking at one of my friends. This was the first face I recognized in hours, and I could see the worry on her face. This comforted me a bit, because I vaguely knew I was being looked after. As my thinking ability got slowly better, I got more worried about this being permanent and never being the same again, and I eventually broke down and just started crying. It probably was the extreme mental strain, being extremely tired, and me just wanting it to be over. This carried on for a while, until I could make clear that I needed to use the bathroom. My friend carried me to the toilet, and after that, all I could say is that I wanted to lie down. I was carried to bed, and finally fell to sleep. The morning after, I woke up at around 8 a.m. with a substantial hangover. The friends where the party was at asked me how I was feeling and started to fill me in about what happened. After a few hours, I was able to drive home, and I slept the rest of the morning. I'm writing this the Tuesday after the incident. I don't seem to have suffered any permanent damage. My thoughts are still a bit cloudy, and I have some pain in my bladder, but both are getting better by the day. My friend also seems to be okay as well. I believe that the atizolam and clonazepam really saved me from having a full-on psychosis, and I feel really lucky having such great friends that did the best they possibly could have done. Some may think that calling an ambulance would be a better course of action, but with 3-MeO-PCE being so unknown, I don't think they would have done any better. Coming down in a familiar environment with people I could at least vaguely recognize was the only thing that was mildly comforting. Overall, this was a horrible experience, but I'm very happy to be alive and almost my old self again. I hope this serves as a source of information for other people experiencing something similar, so that they know that everything can be alright after a few days. If you're liking this content so far, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment down below your craziest drug experience. I would love to hear them. Also, this next story is 3-MeO-PCP, not 3-MeO-PCE, because there wasn't many reports on 3-MeO-PCE, so I had to include this one. Alright, let's go on to the next story. This experience happened just last weekend, and because there are so few reports of 3-MeO-PCP on here, I thought it would be a good idea to let everyone know what I experienced. I was with my buddy, M, and we happened to run into a mutual friend of ours, B, at the mall. We decided to hang out together and do some drugs, considering we haven't all been together in a while, and B had some 25I-NBOMe and 3-MeO-PCP he wanted us to try. M and myself had both done 25I-NBOMe on a few occasions, and considering we are both some suckers for dissociatives, we decided to try the latter. Let me start by saying, I've done a lot of DXM and ketamine, so I have a pretty high tolerance to NMDA antagonists, so I felt comfortable doing a relatively high dose. I insufflated 10 milligrams and waited for onset for about 45 minutes, at which point I took another 10 milligrams nasally. After about 2 hours, I was barely high, and I just felt like a light ketamine buzz. It made walking feel pretty strange, but other than that, I felt very normal. Then, about a half hour later, I started to get a headache, which over the course of the next hour, evolved into such a massive burden, I could literally do nothing but lie down and wait for it to pass. It felt as if my brain was bleeding all over internally, and as if my eyes were swollen so badly, I could barely see anything. I could only lay in darkness and hope that it would end shortly. After about 5 more hours of this, I finally managed to get some sleep, and I woke up the next day with no headache or any negative effects from the previous night. All in all, I was quite shocked at the reaction my body had to a class of chemical I thought it was quite familiar with. I've never had a reaction like this before with any other dissociative, or any other chemical at all for that matter. I thought that perhaps it was the batch I ingested that resulted in the negative effects, but B and M both said they had an amazing time, so I've concluded it was just my body chemistry. Strange happenings.